Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is the November reading in the Finger Lakes Art Series. Tonight we have Anders Carlson-Wee. Where is Anders? There he is, behind the table right there. Many of you have met him already. I'll say a few words before Anders comes up, just about next times, right? December 15th, Bart White, Rochester poet, will be here doing his thing. And then January, we have, oh my God, I'm gonna forget their name, and this is gonna be terrible. A young person named Milo, and I'm spacing their last name. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll get back to you with it. But he's terrific. He's amazing. We actually discovered him here in the open mic, and he's coming in to do his thing in January. And then February, we have Jessica Cuello coming in from Syracuse. And in March, yours truly has a new novel coming out. And so I'm going to read from that. My first and only appearance in the Finger Lakes Art Series. Yeah. And in April, you got to give yourself one, right? Yeah. And in April, it's Tony Luzzi coming down from Rochester, terrific poet, whose family happens to own this optical shop next door, which is really a strange coincidence. But he's an amazing poet. And I think that's all I know for now. I think maybe May is George Perot coming in from North Carolina, actually. That's all I know for now. So that's what's coming up, guys. I will send out announcements if you put your names on the mailing list. If you're not already on, I'll make sure you get announcements regularly. So, all right, without further ado, I am extremely pleased to welcome Anders Carlson-Wee to the series. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio and then just talk a little bit about what I know, freestyling it as he put it. He's the author of The Low Passions, his first debut full-length collection of poems, an amazing book. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Anders about this book and about the last book. And they're both really incredible books in conception and execution, and I urge you to get your copies. He is the author of Low Passions, a New York Public Library book group selection, and Dynamite, which is a great little book that I have over there, winner of the Frost Place chapter competition. His work has appeared in Paris Review, the Harvard Review, BuzzFeed, and a lot of other places. I think this is a modest biography. Anders is, as he will tell you tonight and share some experience of, he has been living a rather unusual existence for the past 15 years, kind of living off the grid, dumpster diving, hopping freight trains with his brother, and sort of finding a way to be a writer that didn't involve having to have a job. So, bow down to you, sir. And right now he's in California, native of Minnesota, living in LA, trying to sell your life story to the movies, I think, in a way. Yeah. So he'll talk more about that. But I give you Anders Carlson-Wee.
Hey everybody, let me get this moved a little bit, get this adjusted. I'm a tall one, so I need to come up. Can you all hear me okay at this volume? Yeah? Good. Yeah, thank you all. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for the introduction, George. And I'm going to share kind of a range of poems from the collection Disease of Kings that my new book just came out last month, so I'm excited to be on the road and sharing some pieces with you all. I'll explain some of the narrative elements as I go along. This first poem is called Hired, and it's kind of about a work and sometimes running into some strange forms of work. So this one's Hired. The Grand Am's window rolled down, but it was too dark out to see in. A hand waved me over. A voice asked if I wanted to make some quick cash. Standing right where I was standing for the next 10 minutes, simple as that. Just stand here, I said. Simple as that, the voice said, and the hand stretched out a 20. It was weirdly humiliating, doing what I was already doing. Like being told to act natural on camera and sensing that who you are is failing to entertain. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Hey, I never made so much in such little time. Never been so nervous doing nothing. I kept needing the car to come back. Some sign it was over. A horn, a gunshot, the rising pitch of oncoming sirens. I could accept I'd never know what I'd been used for, but I wanted proof it was finished. So that's the first poem in the collection, and it being called Hired is kind of an ironic piece because the whole book is about a friendship between two young men who don't want to take regular employment. They sort of live off the grid and dumpster dive for all their food and clothing. And they sort of see free time as the ultimate form of freedom. And so they're like pursuing that at great length. And as the book goes on, you kind of see the ways in which that is like working for them in giving them a certain sense of freedom, and in ways that's like actually kind of costing them a lot. But that's kind of their lifestyle. And the book is dedicated to my grandfather, Roald Carlson. He was a Lutheran pastor, and it's dedicated to him because he was extremely frugal. He grew up in Madagascar as a missionary child and didn't own shoes until he was 15 years old. And then as an adult, he maintained that frugality, and all the furniture in his house was from curbside pickups. And the first gift I remember him giving me is when I was little. I had a bedroom that was like too hot in the summer, and I must have been complaining about it. And he found a fan in a dumpster and like fixed the wiring, and then gave it to me as a gift. And that was my fan in my bedroom through my childhood. So I got these like early impressions of frugality from him. And this next poem is kind of a bit of like an origin story for myself about that headspace of extreme frugality. I'm from northern Minnesota. I don't know if do y'all know where Fargo is? Yeah, so I'm from Moorhead, which is just like on the Minnesota side of the river, but really it's basically an appendage of Fargo. So that's the climate for this poem. You got to picture like, you all know this is a northern place, so like -40 wind chill. Where I grew up, there we didn't wait for the school bus outside because it was too cold, so you'd wait inside and the bus would stop somewhere and everybody would run out. So getting to school took a long time. Very extreme wind chill there, not a forested area like this. But anyway, that's kind of the headspace for this poem. And I got a question for you all. If you were going to take a cup and go to a soda fountain and fill the cup with each different type of soda, what would you call that drink? Do you have a name for that one? Or is that, maybe that's more generational, like my generation more? You don't have a name for that?
Well, if we're alcohol, I call it a Long Island iced tea.
Oh, iced tea. Okay, yeah. Yeah, a lot of people call it a suicide. And where I grew up, we called it a graveyard. And that comes into this poem. This one's called Cups. Hovering near the line, I watch a lady order coffee and ask for a second empty cup. But once she has the cup in hand, she thinks better of it and, leaving, drops it in the trash. I know about cups. They're trees ground to a pulp and coated with thin skins of plastic, not unlike condoms, that make recycling impossible. In 9th grade, I kept a Subway cup in my locker and cradled it each day at lunch beneath my coat as I trudged through sub-zero winds and gusting snows to the franchise, where I'd blend in with the crowd who'd already ordered, then step boldly toward the soda fountain, which was patrolled by the staff, and fill my cup with Sprite, Dr. Pepper, Mellow Yellow, Cherry Coke, making what we called a graveyard. I had the cup so long, I named him. Bathed him daily at the drinking fountain near the gym, and I never let his lip get torn or pinched. What stopped all this was Subway updating its logo. Instantly, my cup looked old and wrong, and I couldn't keep making my graveyard. Unless I was willing to switch to a new cup, which I was, and did. So the capitalist in me came out anyway at the end. Just switch cups, just get a new one, whatever. But yeah, that's kind of a piece from my childhood. Early frugality, early signs of my pathological frugality. So in this collection, you're following these two friends. The speaker is basically based on myself, and then his friend is named North. And the two of them are doing all these scams where they dumpster dive for their food and clothing, and then if they need some cash, they'll sell some of the stuff they find in the trash in like fake moving sales. They're not actually moving, but they believe that moving sales are a little more exciting, kind of like last chance to get this sort of thing. So they're doing their little scams, and that's how the book kind of starts. And they have this shared worldview, but their relationships to their families are really different. The speaker has two pastors for parents who are very loving and supportive and can provide him like a safety net if he gets into trouble with this weird lifestyle. Meanwhile, North not only does not have a safety net, but he's also providing for an alcoholic father. So this next poem kind of draws on those differences between the two of them. And it also looks at another way that they're sort of avoiding the monetary system altogether. This one's called Snow. It was the law. You had 4 hours after snowfall to get your sidewalk cleared. Our landlord hated the chore so much, he paid us $5 per inch toward rent. North shoveled. I came behind with salt that glowed in the streetlights like a second snow, as if we were unmaking and remaking the conditions. That winter, North's dad disappeared again, but this time, North didn't bother to report it. Thanksgiving passed, Christmas came and went. It's deep, but it's easy, North said one night, tossing load after load over his shoulder, the powder twisting in the sky and shushing against his coat. Each time the snow let up, we pored over weather reports, hoping for blizzards. If it keeps up like this, I said, February will be free. In March, his dad was back in town, 20 pounds later with no explanation, fishing for little loans. When he heard about February's good fortune, he started leaning on North. My own dad had never asked me for anything, and I wondered what it would mean to know him that way. The snow kept coming down. What are you going to do, I said, fanning cupfuls of salt on the concrete. North shrugged. Give him February. You can't, I said. North lifted a shovelful and heaved it. Stop picturing your own dad, he said. By April, February was spent. In May, North asked if his dad could move in. He was much younger in person than North had made him seem. We gave him a closet, but soon his shit was everywhere. This is temporary, I kept saying. Without snow, the rent outdid us. I caved and made the call. My dad covered most of the summer, treated the three of us to dinner. I'd forgotten how embarrassing it was when he offered to pray over meals. But glancing around the table, I realized everyone was grateful but me. So that's the first part of the book, kind of getting into this relationship between the two friends, and they're kind of doing their thing. In section 2 of the book, the friend North takes a seasonal job fishing in Alaska, so he leaves town for the summer, and that's partly to like raise funds for his dad. So he's sort of forced into a form of responsibility. And the speaker is left behind sort of grappling with this new loneliness. They're so isolated from the rest of the world that they're like very codependent and don't have a lot of other connections. So the speaker is kind of grappling with this loneliness. And as a way of kind of filling that void, he starts renting out North's bedroom as a bed and breakfast. And so he's having these guests come and stay with him, and then he's cooking them meals in the morning from all the food he finds in the dumpsters. But of course, he's not telling them that. So he's got a little thing going there. And so what I'm telling you is don't stay at my bed and breakfast. That's the hint I'm dropping. But that's kind of his new system to cope with this loneliness. And in that section of the book, you get a series of dramatic monologues from the perspectives of these guests who have come to stay at the bed and breakfast. And this next poem is his first guest. His name is Lou, and he's in his 70s and is in town to bet on horse races. You don't start at zero. You start way below zero. You got your gas money, admission. You grab a dog and a beer and hit the ATM, which takes a not so small feat. By the time you set eyes on horses, you're down to 30, 40 bucks and you haven't even placed a bet. I started coming when my wife died. She wouldn't marry a gambler, so after her funeral was my first chance in 47 years. Oh, I don't bet a lot of money. If you don't bet a lot, you can't make a lot, but you can stay in it. Some guys, they hit the pick three in the superfecta. Those guys are gods, not me. I just work the chalk and try to stay out of the red. To tide me over, my wife used to let me bet chocolate chips. We'd watch the races on TV and place our bets in bowls. She'd tease me for playing it safe. Loosen up, she'd say. Then she'd put it all on Here Is Happy to win. She loved that horse. She'd lose, of course, and go make cookies with her losses while I worked the chalk. After 47 years of that, it's hard to remember I'm betting real money, losing real money. When I win, I remember, I can tell you that much. I'll never be a god, but I'm still here. The only god I ever met in person was my wife. No bullshit. She hit the superfecta one time. Filled her bowl on 4 horses and named the order, the exact order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and she won. After we stopped shouting and cussing and jumping up and down, we did a little 2-step right there on the living room rug. And at the end, I even dipped her. She had red hair for miles. It was beautiful. So that's Lou. How's everybody doing? Holding up okay? Listen to some poetry? Great. Yeah, I've got a few more for you. And then afterwards, we're going to get into a little bit of a conversation piece. And if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to take them. So yeah, hope you're having a good time with these. This book is based on my 20s. And basically, when I finished high school, I knew I wanted to go into the arts. And in my logic, that meant that I would never have any money because it's not a very financially sound decision to go into the arts. So I wanted to learn how to be more self-reliant and sort of scrap for myself. So I went off to a series of wilderness survival schools across the country. And somewhat ironically, at those wilderness schools, I met a lot of anarchist kids who knew a lot about urban survival. And so from those kids, I learned a lot more about like modern dumpster diving techniques. Freight train hopping, which I ended up doing a lot of in my 20s to travel around for free and see the country. And they had all these little scams, like how to ship mail for free and stuff. They were quite something, these kids. But I learned some skills from them. And then in my 20s, I lived on about $3,000 a year for that whole decade, dumpster diving for all my food and clothing. And I only spent money on rent and like emergencies that came up. And that was kind of my lifestyle. And I would do long cross-country trips. One of them was a bike tour cross-country for 6 months, and I did that trip on $200. So that was like the kind of budget I was working with during those times. And one of my tricks while traveling was hanging out in diners, and when people got up and left their meals behind, I would like swoop in and eat whatever they'd left. And that was one way I would travel cheaply. This next poem is kind of about that type of thing. This one's called The Family. In perfect synchrony with the family, rising from the booth and laughing their way toward the door, I ditch my coffee on the counter and slide in where they've been. I wolf the father's Reuben and move to the daughter's grilled cheese. I make quick work of melted milkshakes, no looking up to see if I'm seen. And although I'm counting each second it takes to pound the leftover plates, at the end of it, I wipe my lips with a cloth napkin and linger, letting myself imagine a wife and kids gone on a trip to the bathroom, hot water running as she scrubs Mrs. Butterworth's from their fingers, fixes their hair. The waitress comes for dishes, too involved in her own life to notice I don't have the right clothes, the right face. Yes, I say, we're finished. So this next one is something I drafted before the pandemic hit. And then when I was putting this book together, I was sort of like, almost like disturbed to feel how much it felt like it was like resonating with that time period of the pandemic and kind of what people were forced into doing in terms of isolation and quarantining. And it made me question my own lifestyle a little bit because it felt like this poem's about my life, but it was like everyone's nightmare during the pandemic. So, but this one, I hope it will resonate on that level with the pandemic stuff or with other things in your life. This one's called Living Alone. Another day of not seeing anyone but the faces on TV. For company, I record my impressions of celebrities and play them back, but the voices don't sound like them and don't sound like me. I peel an orange and smell my hands. I read portions of a mystery in different rooms to make it feel like different things are happening. The longer I'm alone, the smaller a gesture could be and still console or rattle me. Strange to need so little, but to need it so badly. I step into the air conditioning of Target and ask after brands I know they carry, just to hear someone say yes. All right, yeah, I'll do one more for you all. Thank you all so much for listening. This one comes near the end of the collection and it's kind of an epistolary letter style poem. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it and hope we have a nice conversation afterwards. I know your first time for this? Yeah, so I hope you get to meet everybody and get involved. Yeah, this one's called Lay It Bare. I know you're hungry for it. More money, more news, desperate for any laurel that parades you as happier than you know you are. A car, a cruise, some haircut reeking so deeply of depression, no one with a nose can miss it. Making more each year, spending more, the pride of how little time you have to spare. I know I embarrass you, still living on expired food I find, dented tuna I squirrel away, spending at a pace slower than a pulse. Slow, that's what I have. I'm not happy either. I walk past bars where flush people drink, markets where I dumpster what I eat, down streets quiet enough to hush the last 10 years, parks dark enough to find Gemini, Lyra. I don't wish you were poor. I wish you were here. Thank you. Yeah.
So I want to start with everybody's questions, thoughts, responses.
Yeah, thank you. I was amazed, I guess, at your ability to recite your pieces like that. Just I find that's really remarkable. Thank you for that. Just enjoyed that. As one who's, I guess, an avid birder, a wild appreciator of wild birds, I was curious about your connection. If you have any comment about the loon, the common loon that's on.
Yes.
I like that T-shirt.
Thank you.
I was kind of curious if you had any connection to the wild.
Yes, I have a few thoughts. One is if we turned off all the lights in here, guess what? This is a glow in the dark, which is pretty cool. Just kind of cool. Yeah. Pretty cool. But yeah, state bird from Minnesota, and that's where I'm from. So the loon, and the loon has featured in several of my poems since it's such a familiar bird to me. There's a great family story. My parents are both from Lutheran pastor families, and there's a lake in northern Minnesota called Cabacona that has a shoreline called Preacher's Point, because back in the 50s, a bunch of pastors from the Lutheran Church all bought and built cabins there. And my grandfathers were both part of that moment. So my parents grew up going to the same lake without ever meeting each other as kids, and then later got married, having met in Boston. And later on, at some point, there was this story that came out where my mom was talking to my dad's brother, and he was David, and he was saying, you know, I used to go down on the dock every night in the summer and make loon calls, and I'm trying to get them good, and then I'd get them calling back to me.
Oh.
And he kind of explained this, and then most of these cabins are like a quarter mile apart, very close together, kind of. And then my mom said, you know, my dad, so my grandpa, used to go down to his dock at night, right after sunset, and do loon calls, and he'd get the loons calling back to him. It turned out that maybe they were just calling to each other the whole time. Anyway, just a fun family lore kind of piece. But yeah, I love birds. I love bird calls for sure. And thank you for bringing up the recitation. The answer to that, it wasn't really a question, I know, but it's not so much that I really wanted to do that when I started writing, but I have dyslexia, and so it's hard for me to look up and down from paper over and over again. The words on the page can kind of swim, and so it makes me more nervous. It's really easy for me to lose my spot. But because I have dyslexia, I've relied heavily on my ear.
Okay.
And so once I became a poet, I sort of realized that I could memorize a really large amount of language. And also when I edit my books, I memorize the whole book and then edit in my head.
Wow.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah, for sure.
So in all of you travel a lot. Do you have a favorite place? I know it sounds like a cheesy question to ask, but.
Yeah. Favorite place. My favorite place for a nature setting is probably the Sierras in California. Just incredible. It's white granite slabs that like go down at 45-degree angles into the water, and then at night, like a full moon, it lights up all the white granite, and it's like the most magical space. And it's so good for swimming off the granite and stuff. So that's a nature place. For a country that I don't hear a lot about, people saying they like, that I really like, Bosnia. I thought Bosnia was a really cool place. Really, really interesting history, really interesting like religious conflicts there that they've had wars over, and sort of a fraught history, but interesting. And it's a beautiful landscape too, very mountainous, and friendly people. Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, that you like mountainous landscapes and desert landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
And you do not like subtropical landscapes or tropical landscapes.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the tropics.
Can you talk about that for a minute for the benefit of my wife who's from Florida?
Yeah, I don't know exactly why. I just think I react heavily to aesthetics as an artist. And for some reason, the aesthetics of the tropics, it just doesn't really sit with me. I don't feel like I should be there. I'm not saying no one else should be there. But yeah, I like desert, and I like mountain, and like alpine lakes, probably my favorite spots.
You said this area reminds you of Minnesota. Does
Yeah.
it still if you're driving around? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And not where I'm from though. Like more like southern or eastern Minnesota. Where I'm from is prairie landscape with a clay-rich soil, so there's no natural trees there except on riverbanks. So it's very windswept. Nothing to stop the winds, especially in the winter.
Wow. Going towards Buffalo, you'll see that.
Yeah. I bet Buffalo does have that off the water. Yeah, totally. Yeah, other questions? Happy to talk about whatever. Yeah.
This isn't very well formulated, and I don't mean it to be an impertinent question, but
yeah.
Thinking about genre, I mean, there's such a strong memory or memoir element in poetry is presented anyway.
Yeah.
What's your choice of poetry as a genre, as opposed to say prose memoir? What does poetry do that you couldn't get from writing more
totally
prosy?
Absolutely. Yeah. The answer to that would be, the ultimate answer to that would be pretty long, right? Like it'd be like a lot of things to consider. But I mean, poetry gives you the cadences, the focus on rhythm, musical elements of speech. It gives you brevity, like a compression, and the kind of like implosion or like the burst that you can get. You get the silence around it, like the kind of resonance of saying less and it meaning so hopefully more. You also get the ability as a narrative writer that I am, like as a narrative person, you can tell a partial story, but make it resonate. You don't necessarily have to follow as much like beginning, middle, end, or as much plot causality. You can, but you don't have to as much. So you have certain freedoms to tell a partial story and make it resonate in the way you want it to. Tell the beginning and then resonate, or like just kind of jump in somewhere in the middle of a stream. So there's kind of a certain flexibility of like metaphorical implications instead of having to follow as much like a causal plot structure. Those are a few of the elements that I think of. They're also, since they're compressed and they're in a cadence, you can memorize them. Not me as the writer, but like people as readers, you can like kind of have them with you. You can like carry them around inside your body. And that really appeals to me as a reader. I like to like memorize poems and have them with me. So those are a few of the things to consider. But the genres aren't that important to me. I happen to love some of those slants that poetry offers. But I love writing prose, and I love reading prose. I love reading novels and short stories. So they each offer a slightly different flavor, but they're all relatable too. Sometimes the categories get overemphasized for monetary purposes, for sales. They need to give it a category so that it can be sold in a certain light. And so in some ways, it feels like genre becomes mainly like a capitalistic function in a way, instead of as much an artistic freedom. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
We in the interviews we've done, we did them for 2 different books. His first collection is 85 pages, and it's about a young man going out into the world and wanting to have all these different experiences. And then the second collection is kind of this young man coming to kind of the end of that, I think, or sort of the exploring the other side of his personality, which is wanting to be more withdrawn, wanting to be more domestic.
Yeah, it's a very domestic project.
And that book is 51 pages?
82 in there.
Oh, is it? Is it really?
Yeah, it's longer than when you read it you read it as a Word document.
Okay.
That's
why. Okay.
Yeah.
I got the advance.
Yeah, it's very similar length. Yeah.
But it feels more compressed.
Yeah, it is. Book. It's less words by kind of a lot.
I asked you about that. My thought was, well, he's tired of the world, and so the brevity reflects the fact that he's tired of everything. He's like, no, it's not that. He's like, I really just wanted to get it as compressed as I possibly could. Can you talk a little bit more about why you wanted, what it is about compression that's so appealing to you?
Oh, for sure. A few things. One is it's reflecting the mentality of the speaker. He's someone who doesn't want new things. He wants to reuse and reimagine, reinvent. So the poems are relatively short, and the book is relatively short, and each word and each line and each kind of resonance is working on several different levels. So, and that's true of poetry in general. You don't want a line to do one thing. You want it to do like 4 things. So you're always working on that compression as a poet. And I think I was, trying to take that to the farthest as I could go. So it's reflecting the headspace, is the kind of efficiency and frugality, even with the language. That's like the speaker's headspace. I also wanted like a kind of like a short story mood, something you could read in one setting, in one sitting with it, and read through the whole thing in only a matter of a couple hours, and then hopefully for there to be like a lot of resonance as you revisit and spend more time with the collection. I was going to add some third thing to that felt important to me, but now I'm forgetting what it was. Yeah. Oh no, I know what I was going to say. I edit with a kind of like an accordion style. That's how I think of it. I write a lot of material, and I get rid of almost everything over and over again. I keep doing like a push out, push in. So for my first book took me 10 years to write, The Low Passions, and I drafted about 1,500 poems, all in the same world, and I used 53 of them. So I'm not good at math, but basically I got rid of everything. I used almost nothing. I kept only what was the very, very, very best. And the same with Disease of Kings. For example, there's a monologue. I read the one from Lou's perspective. There's one from Oscar's perspective. And for drafting that poem in Oscar's voice, I drafted more than 20 monologues before getting to the one that I used in the book. That are all in Oscar's voice. And, some people really liked those. Some of my friends really liked them and thought, I should do a whole thing with all these Oscar poems. And I said, no, this one's the best one. I'm only going to use the one because it's the best. And so that's kind of my attitude. It's I don't want people to read the 19 other poems that aren't quite as good. I want them to read only the best ones.
Yeah, we talked about that,
Yeah.
When you're a poet, it's kind of your fate that people, if they know you at all, they might know you for 1, 2, 3 poems, and that's it. That they might have read in 4 or 5 different anthologies or collections somewhere. And so I asked authors, if you had one poem that you wanted to be remembered for in this book, which one would it be? And that was your answer, Lou, right?
Yeah. It's, at least in terms of me, for kind of for myself, that was a difficult one for me to write. I like how it came out. But I'm in the family, that one about sneaking meals at diners. That one took me more than 5 years to finish. I tried an endless amount of approaches to that poem. It was much longer at one stage. It was shorter at another stage. It had several different titles. It went in a lot of different directions. And it took me more than 5 years to finally find what I was looking for. So I work really hard on my pieces, and I write a lot of material. I write a huge amount of material, and I use almost none of it. Yeah, that's kind of my approach.
One more.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, at what point would you say you were suddenly thinking of yourself as a poet or as one who could create a line of poetry?
That's on my list of questions.
Oh, is it? Okay, sorry, I don't want to disturb you, but.
When I became a poet, and what you don't know about Anders, that he has.
So maybe you had something about your beginning as one interested in poetry.
Yeah.
I hope you'll talk in this answer. I'm planting a seed about your previous sort of
life.
Prior to poetry,
For sure. Yeah, I'll talk about both of those things. I think poetry, in a lot of ways, goes back to my childhood and having dyslexia. And so when I was learning how to read and write, I was having a lot of trouble. And my parents would read aloud to me to try to help me learn. And I was ashamed that I wasn't learning. I knew I was supposed to be learning. My friends could read, And so they'd read me a whole page while I was sitting looking at them. And then they'd finish the page and I'd say, hey, I can read. And then I'd recite the whole page back to them, pretending I was reading off the paper. And so from an early age, I started learning how to memorize large amounts of language as a survival strategy. And then in my family, one of the ongoing jokes has always been that if we watch a sitcom together or something, after an episode, my parents or my brothers will be quoting the dialogue to each other, joking about what was funny in the episode. And I'll interrupt and say, no, that's not actually what the characters said. And I'll have it all memorized because I just have a brain for that. So I think the cadences of human speech was my first love of language, was how people talk aloud, and not what it's like to read a book, because reading books was intimidating to me and it was something I couldn't do. And then even now I read slowly, so it's always been something I feel bad at, slow reader. So it was more about the sound aloud. That's what really drew me in. And then I'll come back to the thing you want to talk about. But then the other thing that pushed me over was I went to college at a state school in Washington State, and I had a poetry teacher there who just really brought it to life for me. She was so gifted as a teacher, at least for me, how she was resonating with me. And it really helped open up my mind and give me a type of confidence that maybe I could have something to offer if I did my own thing and kind of didn't necessarily have to conform to what poetry is supposed to be. And when I've talked to her about that, she always has this attitude of oh, you had the talent, I didn't do anything. And I really resist that, because I think she really did help me find something that I think it would have been hard for me to find without her. So that's the writing answer. And then what George wanted me to talk about is growing up from age 10 to age 20, I was a skater, a rollerblader, a trick skater, handrails and staircases, that kind of, skateboarding. And I did that every day with my brother for 10 years, like training really hard, and then skated professionally in my teen years, riding for skate companies. So that was my first love. And if you're a skater, what you're really doing is filming skating, because every skater is making a skate video. Like that's what you're working on. So all of my childhood was videography, thinking about cameras, thinking about angles, and thinking about what I look like from a third person perspective. Because as you're designing your skate tricks, what you're thinking about is how they'll look from the camera, not how they'll feel to do, but how they'll look from over there. And so there's a lot of like getting outside your own head and like viewing things from different angles and stuff. And I think that was really helpful for me visually once I became a writer to like build images and choose like distances from subject matters, like how far away does it feel if you were imagining it as a camera angle. And anyway, skating had a big impact on me. And this is hard to talk about without getting into a whole essay, but my writing style is heavily influenced by skating and like skate culture. And it's hard to explain how that works, but for me, it's like synesthesia, where people have overlapping senses, right? You like hear colors and whatever, see music. I kind of have that with skating and writing. It just feels like the same thing to me. And I was telling George today, actually, he was asking about this. I watch skate videos like every day. And for me, it's as if I'm reading. Like it gives me aesthetic influence. Like it gives me like aesthetic ideas that I can use in writing. And I don't think you can really easily explain how that works unless you just have done something that much that you can overlap them. But skating is an endless set of aesthetics. It's just all about aesthetics. Skating doesn't even have narrative content, so it's just how it looks and the aesthetic choices going into that. So it's like a very pure art form in a way, free of content.
Might be an opportunity to talk about the film that you did with your brother, who's also a very fine poet.
Yeah.
And making that film and the experience of traveling, doing what you did.
For sure, yeah. My brother and I did a free hopping trip. We've done a lot of free hopping, but we did this one trip from Minneapolis to Seattle. And we wanted to make a short film about it, and we tried to film it 1 year, and like everything went wrong. Like we lost all our water getting on the train because our thing exploded. Our water thing exploded. So we were starting a 5-day cross country trip without any water. And then it was like everything went wrong. We had to get off a train that stopped. We switched trains like 4 times. We had terrible weather. We eventually got caught and kicked off the train in the deserts of Washington State. Anyway, so we didn't get nearly enough footage to make the film. And so then we did it all over again the next year. And it ended up being really important that we failed to do it once, because on the second time, when you're doing that kind of thing, you have 5 days, right? And you're not near any outlets or anything like that. So we had about battery power for about 3 hours of filming in the course of 5 days. So we really had to know what we wanted to film, and having done the whole route once before, we could know what was coming. So we'd be like, oh, there's that really cool bridge in Mandan, North Dakota. We need to be ready. The second we get near that bridge, get the camera on, get the shot. So that was like a really fun and interesting project. It was also really fun from a perspective of constraints on art, because we were in an 8x4 box of metal, and that was the only place you could be to film. So like the constraints on what type of shot you could get were really limited, and it made a big challenge for like how to make the visuals compelling. Yeah.
That film
Yeah, it
is
was a cool
called,
project.
if anybody's interested, it's called Riding the High Line. It's a 16-minute award-winning short.
Yeah, we took it to a lot of film festivals and had a really fun time doing the film festivals circuit and won some awards. Yeah, including here in Rochester.
Yeah.
Rochester, yes,
Right,
north of here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other, I don't know, question or yeah. You and then you.
Okay.
Two unrelated things. Did you say anything about the title? Disease?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So disease of King's is the nickname for the disease gout. And kings used to get it, and rich people used to get it because it's from overeating and overconsumption, basically. And in the book, the friend North suffers from gout, and he's having a series of attacks because he's overeating. They're dumpster diving for such high quantity and high quality food that he's like overeating all these meats and steaks and bacon and olive oil and stuff. So he's over consuming, and he has the disease of King's from this lifestyle of dumpster diving. So there's like a practical element to the title, but there's obviously it's kind of rippling outward. The irony of them being able to eat so well that they're like kings eating out of the trash. And also just kind of this idea of like the layers of disease of our culture. And also the speaker is kind of like thinks of himself as a bit diseased in his headspace, and is a pretty extreme loner, which is another element of like the idea of being a king is like one of the issues with that for the king themselves is there's no one else who shares the role, right? So you're, even though it's like all this privilege, you're isolated. And that's kind of where the speaker is. He has all this privilege in a lot of ways. He's choosing this lifestyle. He's not taking a job. He has parents who can support him. So he has a lot of privilege, but he's kind of in this place where he becomes incredibly lonely. Yeah. Yeah, and then you had something?
Yeah, not a question, just a comment. I find it interesting that you had successful journeys through, around the country with freight hopping,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, because I just suspected that after the beat era, let's say, my personal experience, my last cross country hitchhike was 1973. I thought after that it was like everything it just kind of evaporated. Just that possibility was gone. But here you are. You were able to.
Yeah, I've hitchhiked thousands of miles in this country and abroad, and freight top a lot.
You were able to do that. And do it artistically.
Yeah, they're slowly getting rid of all the cars that are easily rideable on like a mile long. Yeah, right now, like on a mile-long train that's going cross-country, there'll be like one or two cars that are actually a good ride, and otherwise you're like totally exposed. Yeah. And all those cars are from the 80s, and so they're slowly getting rid of them. There was a heyday in the 80s where the CEO of BNSF was a former train hopper, and he like relaxed all the policies. So there was like a little heyday when that was happening, and since then it's been an aggressive, attitude, but it's like mainly about getting rid of everything you can ride on. But that's tough because you can ride on almost anything. It's just hard to stay hidden. So yeah, but it's an ongoing thing. I mean, it's definitely still a thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Can you talk? I got a couple more little things. One is
sure.
Maybe not so little, but you talk about dumpster diving. You mentioned it a lot. This is something that if you think about an average person's life, like, okay, you go, what do you do during your day? I don't know. I get up, I have a cup of coffee, I read my newspaper on my tablet maybe, or I sit down and I have to go to work and then I do this. Where does dumpster diving fit in? I know you said you still actually do this in LA. LA, which is, we talk about the differences in a city.
Yeah.
Where does this fit into your day?
Yeah, late at night. Yeah, you want to go after stores are closed, ideally. I've done it other ways sometimes, like at Trader Joe's. One time, me and my friend found 2 Trader Joe's work shirts in the dumpster. And so then for a little while, just almost like as a joke, we'd go during the day wearing the shirts and like look like employees so that if anyone passing by saw us, we were like blending in. That was kind of fun. But mostly I go around midnight and go to places that are like fully shut down. And sometimes I go to a grocery store and I have to wait because the staff stays late at night, cleaning stuff up, throwing stuff away. Sometimes you have to kind of hang out while they're finishing around midnight. But yeah, I go really late at night, and then you can decide how complicated you want your route to be. I mean, there's dumpsters where you just get general food products, like grocery stores like Trader Joe's are great places because they package almost everything, so it's really easy to sort through. Whole Foods is sloppier because they don't do as much heavy packaging, just for example. But then you can also dumpster dive at like factories, so like factories that produce outdoor clothing or camping gear, factories that produce individual products like Naked Juice or Cliff Bar or whatever. Like there's factories for all these things, so you can go find really niche dumpsters too. My favorite in Seattle when I was living in Washington State was the Theo chocolate dumpster. I don't know if you guys know Theo chocolate. It's like a very high-end, all-organic, Madagascar vanilla. It's kind of like the best chocolate you can buy. And we used to dumpster dive like so much. One night we got like 5-gallon buckets worth, and it was something like $3,000 worth of dark chocolate all in one night. And we spent the whole next year coming up with all these different ways to eat it. And we were making chocolate fondue, and we were giving it away to friends, and like everyone's birthday was like this epic chocolate feast. That was really fun. I even went so far as to take the tour of the factory because I was curious why so much gets thrown away. So I took this whole tour kind of like as a spy, but I didn't tell them why I was there. And then near the end, I very casually was like, "What's up with like your waste system and like what ends up in the trash?" I said something like that. And the person giving the tour said, "Well, our flavor notes are our brand. We're like a high-end chocolate company. So if we make a batch of like the sea salt almond and it's like a little too salty or not quite salty enough, it's got to go because like our flavor note is the brand." And so basically I was eating like slightly oversalted and slightly undersalted chocolate. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever incorporated any of the, because I mean, we live in a wasteful society, have you ever incorporated any of that into your poetry?
Yeah. How do you mean incorporated it? Like
just as topic.
Yeah, for sure. I would say this whole book is about it, and it's kind of going at it through story and through kind of implication. It's not really like taking it on head on, like, hey, look at the food waste problem. It's more like this is just a story about two guys who are doing this lifestyle, and so the topic is there kind of implicitly, but the whole time. That's kind of how I approached that. But I also just published an essay in the Sun magazine. I don't know if people know the Sun, but that piece is looking at the same two characters, but it's digging it's like an essay, so it's digging more into the environmental angle and kind of like the eco issues around it. But in the poetry collection, it's just sort of there. But I would say it's there on every page, pretty much. Yeah.
And the last thing, because it's for me anyway. We talk a lot about loneliness over the course of our discussions about these books, and loneliness is a big issue for anyone who writes.
Yeah.
So what role, I guess, does loneliness play in the work and in your writing life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a loner. I'm very introverted. For me, it plays a big role in like having the energy to write, is like having enough time alone. So a lot of my days I'll write in the morning for a few hours, and then I exercise all afternoon, like either hiking or rock climbing. And I find that the time at my desk is totally necessary, but it's more like a grind. It's like my Taurus personality, like wanting to like work hard. But I think of all my good ideas while I'm exercising. And so I kind of feel like every day is like I kind of prime the pump with sitting at the desk and I'm kind of grinding out the effort. And then in the afternoons, the light bulb goes on while I'm exercising. And then I use those ideas I have the next day. And I guess I'm saying that for this answer because I need a lot of that time to be alone to kind of have my mind drift. And then, of course, once I have poems further along, I go on long walks and recite to myself, so I need that time alone too. I don't know. I think it's pretty essential for me in a way. And I don't know what comes first, the personality or the art, or both, kind of both.
Yeah.
They feed each other. But it's not without its complications. I mean, my character in this book, that's basically me, is definitely like hitting a wall of like how much loneliness he can take. Yeah.
You were taking a walk last night around Dansville. Were you reciting to yourself?
No. On tour, when I'm reading every night, it's kind of like, anything else. Because I know, I'm ready for the readings already, so I don't want to like recite right now in my spare time.
You know that story about Wallace Stevens?
Yeah.
Wallace Stevens composing to himself
Yes.
as he walked. They would actually retrace his steps. If he didn't like the line, he would erase a couple of syllables.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope it's been fun. I'd be happy to sign some books if anyone's interested in reading the whole collection. Hope you might consider that. Happy to hear some people are going to read, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to hear other people read too.
And we'll give folks a minute or two to use the bathroom maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Let's take a little break.
One, and then we'll get to it.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah. Like 5 minutes.
Get anything?
Yeah, for sure.
You might just go.